And we do have more breaking news. President Trump announcing a significant move involving Israel. He tweeted just moments ago, quote, "After 52 years, it is time for the United States to fully recognize Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, which is of critical strategic and security importance to the state of Israel and regional stability." Let's go live now to Michelle Kaczynski. She is at the State Department following this. Tell us why this is so significant, especially ahead of this visit.
Hi, Brianna. Right. Now, this is not an internationally recognized sovereignty over the Golan Heights. In fact, just the opposite. Israel seized this land from Syria in the Six-Day War in 1967. It's been seen by the United States for years as occupation. And in documents and in policy statements, the U.S. would recognize that. So we started to see indications that this could change in a number of ways. Recently, for the first time, the U.S. voted against a UN resolution condemning Israel's occupation of these lands. So we saw the opposition to it there. And then just days ago, in a State Department report on human rights, for the first time, instead of calling it occupied, the U.S. called this land Israeli-controlled. So we've been asking the State Department ever since then, what does this mean exactly? And the State Department has played pretty coy with it. It's as if they didn't want to draw attention to it. And when asked, they wouldn't give any detail on it. I mean, just today, Secretary of State Pompeo, who is traveling in Israel, today he's in Jerusalem, he was asked by reporters repeatedly, what does this mean for U.S. policy? Can you tell us what the U.S. policy is? He refused to answer. And now we see this massive change by the president via tweet, Brianna.
Not unusual, but still significant. Michelle Kaczynski at the State Department, thank you. And I want to bring in former Defense Secretary, former CIA Director, and White House Chief of Staff as well, Leon Panetta, who is with us from Monterey, California. Sir, this is our breaking news here. The president recognizing the Golan Heights. What is your reaction to this?
Well, it raises a lot of concern because he's tweeting out another policy that obviously has not been worked out with our international partners, has not been worked through the United Nations in any way, and frankly gives up one of the chips that everyone thought would be part of a Middle East peace agreement deal. And the problem is that it's going to create real problems with our Arab partners in that part of the world. It isn't that Israel doesn't control the Golan Heights, they do. The real question is whether or not recognizing that the Golan Heights are now part of Israel can be accomplished without working with our international partners and international law.
What do you see a role here when it comes to the re-election bid of Benjamin Netanyahu?
Well, it's hard not to put two and two together. The president has made clear his support for Netanyahu. Netanyahu asked that this be done a few days ago. So 2 and 2 equals 4. And I think there's no question that this is part of President Trump's support for Netanyahu in that election.
All right, Secretary, if you can stay with me, we have much more ahead to talk with you about. I do want to talk now about this Washington waiting game that we are in right now. The White House is on edge over the impending release of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report. Mueller's investigation of Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election has been like this cloud just hovering over the first 2 years of the Trump administration. And the signs suggest that the investigation is winding down. So what happens when it is released? Let's bring in White House reporter Sarah Westwood on this story. So how obviously the White House has had some time to think about what they're going to do here, Sarah. What is the plan for handling the report and determining who gets to see what?
Well, Brianna, how the White House responds to the Mueller report is going to depend largely on what's in it. Obviously, if the information is damaging to President Trump, there will be an incentive for the White House to try to prevent the public disclosure of some of it. And if the information is, in the eyes of the White House, exculpatory, then there will be an incentive to try to make that report public. Now, the president's legal team has developed outlines of how to respond to this based on the different ways in which this could play out. Emmett Flood, a White House lawyer, has been holding meetings with with officials to game out strategies for different ways to respond based on a number of different scenarios. And what's going to happen is Special Counsel Robert Mueller is going to give his conclusions in the form of a confidential report to Attorney General Bill Barr, and Barr will then decide what to pass on to Congress. So sources tell CNN that the White House expects to review that version of the report that Barr's giving to Capitol Hill, to see if there's some opportunities to try to exercise executive privilege there. And here at the White House, there are some mixed emotions among aides about the impending end of the Mueller probe. On the one hand, you do have a sense of anxiety among aides because, just like the rest of us, they're in the dark about what's going to be in Mueller's final report. But you also have a sense of relief that this two-year cloud may be coming to an end. So, Brianna, folks here at the White House holding their breath in wait-and-see mode, just like the rest of the country right now.
All right, Sarah Westwood, thank you so much for that. Now, as the White House and the entire country is awaiting Robert Mueller's final report, there are major questions that are still looming. And we have CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez here to walk us through three of the big things that we should be looking for.
Right. There's a lot of anticipation, obviously, for this report. It's 673 days, by the way, since Robert Mueller was appointed as a special counsel. So that's in case anybody is keeping count at home.
I'm sure you're not, Evan.
I certainly am. But the three big questions, I think, are these. The fact is, if this investigation closes in the next couple of days, it's clear that the president has not sat down for an interview. So the question is, did Robert Mueller ask the Justice Department for permission to subpoena the president? We know that the president's team refused to have him sit down. The question is, did the Justice Department tell Robert Mueller, no, you cannot subpoena the president? How was that resolved? Obviously, it did not happen, but the big question is going to be, was there a rejection? And if there was, that's going to have to be reported to members of Congress. I think that's going to be a huge question for us to see. The second question, I think, is on everybody's mind. Whatever happened to Russian collusion? Whatever happened to the question of obstruction of justice? Did Robert Mueller find any sign of Russian collusion? And if so, why didn't he charge it? At this point, so far, in all of the indictments that they've brought, Brianna, there's been nothing that looks like collusion, nothing that essentially charges someone with conspiracy of working with the Russians to throw the 2016 election. That's a big question at this point. And then finally, what does Bill Barr tell Congress, and what does he tell the public? The more detailed Robert Mueller's report, the more problematic it is for Bill Barr, because Bill Barr then has to go through this and decide what he can cut out and tell members of Congress about the findings of Robert Mueller. And so the big question has been, how detailed is this report going to be? Is it going to provide information about people who did not get charged? For example, what Jim Comey did with Hillary Clinton, where he said, well, it didn't reach to the level of a crime, but here's all the different things that she did wrong. And, if we weren't able to bring charges against her. So is that something that Robert Mueller does is in report? We do not know, but certainly what Bill Barr is going to have to handle is exactly those questions.
Could there be more charges, or is the sense that that phase is over?
Look, I think there could always be more charges.